Right, so good day, everyone joining us from around the world. We'd like to welcome you for a very interesting discussion today featuring a very interesting and a unique personality. Now, I think before I introduce to you the person that you see on your screens, I would like to perhaps spell out the real purpose behind our discussion for this afternoon. Now, something that everybody knows, the Olcott Oration is an annual event of Ananda College that sits pretty much at the top of its event calendar every year. This is potentially where every old Anandian, every important stakeholder, everyone that has something to do with Ananda College will come together and invite a distinguished old Anandian, someone whom we consider is an accomplished profession in their respective area of expertise, to come join us and speak on a topic which we feel is an emerging trend. Now, this year, I have the pleasure of introducing to you the gentleman who will be doing the honors for us at the Olcott Oration 2023. And this individual is a distinguished civil engineer who has graduated from the Imperial College of London. He holds a PhD from the University of Alberta. And he's also an individual who has received countless number of awards and accolades from all over the world for his contributions in geotechnical and railway engineering. Importantly, like I mentioned to you before, he's also a distinguished old Anandian and one of the most accomplished civil engineers produced by our country, and currently based in Sydney, Australia. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome and introduce you the Olcott Orator for 2023, Professor Buddhima Indraratna. A warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dinuk, and it's an absolute pleasure for me to be here, and it's great to talk to you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Indeed, Professor. I think it's a pleasure for us to actually have you. I know you're joining us amidst a very busy schedule. In trying to sort out our timing, I understood that you're also on the move during this time, so we really appreciate you taking the effort and the time to join us today. Quite late in the hours for you, we understand, but that commitment and that effort we truly appreciate. So at the outset, I mentioned, I think you're going to be, you're having a very busy schedule these days, in particular with a lot of travel around, if I understood it right. Yes. But it's quite a commitment on your part to fly down all the way from Sydney to Colombo just to be a part of the Olcott Oration 2023. If I may ask you, first up, to set the tone for our conversation, what really motivated you? What was the real reason that inspired you to accept this invitation that was extended to you?
Well, thank you for that question, Dinuk. And obviously, first of all, thank you very much, for inviting me, and especially the Old Boys Association of Ananda for extending this very kind invitation to me. It's a great privilege and an honor to accept this invitation. What actually motivates or excites me is because I would like to convey a message, especially to the young professionals in Sri Lanka and those who are listening to me, how early passions can drive your career pathways and how you can own your career based on what you like to do in life. And I believe that those who listen to me in November, I might be able to inspire or provide some inspiration to many young professionals so they can mimic certain things the way I have done or even do better. And I think this will provide that opportunity, not only for me to provide an opportunity for me to demonstrate what I've done, but I think it might serve as a lesson for some others who are young professionals who are looking towards doing what I have been trying to do.
Understood. I suppose the younger generation in our country is right now looking at finding ways and means of inspire them. I know that the country has gone through challenging times. We've also had a lot of people overseas. Brain drain has been a big discussion in our country thus far. So you stand in a very unique proposition altogether. You've probably settled down in Australia for a while, I assume by now, but you're coming down here to inspire the youth of our country to try and explore their full potential. But I believe, and one big reason that also may have tempted you to the college is the fact that Anand was perhaps one of those places that set the foundation for you. And I think the early school days is always very important in terms of getting the right foundation, and that plays a big part for the rest of how you turn things, or rather how you manage yourself for the rest of your life. So I'm very keen to understand, how did Ananda College sort of influence your personal career, your professional career, and your personal life?
Well, that's absolutely the fundamental part, I think. I mean, from the time I was at Ananda, from grade 2 onwards, I started grade 1 at Royal College, mind you. And I think that was kind of an experiment by my parents, because my brother, my elder brother, was already at Ananda. And for some reason, I was at Royal. But later, after 1 year, they decided, well, probably Ananda was a better place for both of us to be there. So I was transferred to Ananda. So I was there from grade 2 from Ananda. But I can assure you, from the days of the primary school to the high school, the secondary high school, Ananda always had very, very good teachers, very high quality teachers in science and mathematics subjects. And the inspiration that I drew from them, their brilliant teaching methods, that created an environment, an excellent learning environment, where I realized that I honed my passion from the very young days. I became interested in science, I became very good in mathematics, and those successes are partially or wholly attributed to the talents and the skills of those teachers. And I realized that it is something that everybody would probably realize, that the school is the first place where you actually turn and think about, what am I going to do? Where am I going to be in 10 years' time? What will I be in 15 years' time? All these questions tend to come through. And in my case, it was around grade 9 and grade 10 that I seriously start to think, well, what is the professional career that I'm going to select? But quite conveniently for me, because of the talents of the teachers at the time in mathematics and science, it was a relatively easy decision. I thought, even before I went to England after my GCO levels, I was already there knowing that I will be an engineer. But of course, it came later to me what branch of engineering I wanted to be, but that came much later on. But to answer your question very shortly, it is the training, the rigorous training, and the understanding of the science, mathematics, that actually create that pathway towards a technological career. And Ananda College has always been very, very good in that.
So, Professor, I think I have two follow-up questions for you based on that. No doubt, I think it resounds from your explanation, the fact that Ananda has had a very big influence. But I think we're also looking at an era where right now education has become very competitive at a very young age. You mentioned and on the fact that you perhaps had a very open mind up until you maybe got onto grade 9, 10, and you almost did your O levels. And you said you decided to specialize at a very later stage in your life. But right now, when you look at it, we see that a lot of children are facing a lot of competitive exams at a very young, early stage in terms of their school education. What is your take on this situation? Do you think it's healthy? Do you think it's evolving with time and it's a necessity that we're seeing the modern day requirements or the challenges? Or do you see that as something that we should perhaps manage more strategically?
I think it's a part of both. I think you know as well as I do that the parents and the teachers have a significant influence on our careers at the early stages. But the bottom line is, it's your passion that should eventually drive what you want to be. Now, that might come a little bit later, because, I mean, when you are very young, let's say you are in grade 6, 7, 8, you really don't have that grasp what an engineer is going to be, or what a civil engineer is going to be, or a medical doctor. Maybe young children probably have a better understanding of what doctor is, but not to the same extent what engineers got to be. But I later, because when you come to say GC O levels and then come into the GC advanced level, grade 11, grade 12, that is the time that you actually focus on what's out there, what is the type of infrastructure, and the surrounding in Sri Lanka, the surrounding infrastructure in Sri Lanka can also make an impact. Because, for example, you see the port city development, you see the bridges and the roads being constructed, and you will find a lot of young people get drawn into civil engineering when they see the kind of development that is occurring in the country. So it is not just what the parents tell you or what the teachers tell you or encourage you. The passion drives you also from the surroundings, your environment, what goes on, the development in the country. All these things count. Now, where in Sri Lanka, it is true that a lot of young kids have so much pressure from the parents to do well, study 12 hours per day maybe. And that is simply because of the competition in the country. You know that if you want to compare Australia and Sri Lanka, the populations are very similar, 23, 24 million population. But you see, in this country, we have 38 universities. And out of these 38 universities, at least 25 will have engineering, at least 20 of them will have medicine. But if you look at the universities that provide that training for engineers or for doctors, it's just a handful of universities and institutes. So the pressure to get into the universities, to do what you like, is also very, very stressful, even from the time you are a young child in Sri Lanka. Now, our children in Australia, for instance, did not undergo that pressure the way I went at Anandaya College, because our teachers were always encouraging you to do the best. Even if you get 95% in mathematics, some of my teachers would ask you, Buddhima, how come you didn't get 100? You should try harder, and that kind of pressure to some extent would actually help. So I don't believe that working hard and having that pressure is negative. It can actually be to your advantage, because you are learning how to become successful, how to absorb stress from a younger age. And that helps you a lot when you become a professional, because you have been used to it from the time you were in high school. So overall, it's not a bad thing to go through that pressure.
If I find balance, right, Professor, I believe from managing that pressure and being able to cope up with it, I think what we are increasingly seeing at the moment is the fact that in certain aspects, we're seeing that children are unable to cope with that pressure. Now, that could be because we don't have the sufficient support systems. It could be an overdose of the pressure that they're getting, too much of expectation. If I ask you, like I said, the times are changing, so we've probably got to evolve with time as well. But if you are able to give a message to the children of nowadays in terms of, yes, the pressure is good, but you need to be able to also handle it and manage yourself, what would be the advice that you'd give them?
I think at the end of the day, you need to go with what you really like to do in life. As I said earlier, the parents and the teachers can inspire you. They can have even a significant influence on you. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is you need to pick what you like. You need to go with your passion. Your passion cannot be changed by other people, especially when you come into grade 11 and grade 12. By that time, you should have a pretty good idea what your strengths and weaknesses are. You need to optimize your strengths. You need to hone your passion according to your strength. You don't have to be discouraged just because you identify some of your weaknesses. You forget about your weaknesses, but you focus on your strengths, and that's the area that you need to go to. Now, let me give you a very quick example. It is quite common in Sri Lanka that parents and teachers who are close to you will give you a choice. Either become a doctor or an engineer. If you are a female, they don't talk about engineering. It's always either becoming a doctor but of course, there are many other important disciplines and in the country. For example, subjects like economics, commerce, business management. You don't always have to be an engineer. If you are into that kind of area, if you have a very good understanding of human resources and your interpersonal skills, well, going to business, doing commerce and economics, that's an equally good and equally demanding field. So it doesn't matter even if your parents tell you have to somehow study hard and become a doctor. You might be very interested in subjects like economics and commerce rather than trying to study hard in subjects like biology. So I think at the end of the day, your strength also should be how to convince your parents and teachers that your life is what you want to be according to your passion. And that's part of the leadership, where you can go to your parents and to say, this is what I want to do, and make them happy at the end. So that's how
100%. I agree with you on that. I think we're taking our conversation to a different level, but Sri Lanka has been very dependent on service-driven industries. Sri Lanka has been very dependent on tourism, manufacturing industries for export, and so on and so forth. So we have continuously, perhaps IT or technologies, perhaps software industries, perhaps one industry that has evolved of late and has really stepped up. But besides that, we're pretty much focusing on those main areas that we're speaking of. Like you said, things like artificial intelligence, just because the rest of the world is perhaps running after it, doesn't mean that we need to run after it right now. So are you of the opinion as young professionals, as school-going kids, as early professionals, that we should perhaps continue to focus on those core areas? Because human connectivity is perhaps still one of the biggest strengths, because Sri Lankans are still known to be a very warm culture. Do you think that we should continue to perhaps in the short term at least focus on those same core areas, or should we continue to expand into other areas during this time on topics of sustainability and so on, and all these other topics that are coming up in the interim?
I think at the university level, I think the university teaching, and that should encourage the instructors, the professors who are involved in the curriculum development to absorb these new areas of sustainability, circular economy, waste material recycling, and then also the concepts of artificial intelligence, including machine learning principles. We are teaching them to our young professionals right now. I have research students doing PhDs using machine learning and artificial intelligence applied for transport infrastructure. But as I said, you need the basic fundamental and data before you can make models. You can't, in the absence of any data, you can't just come out with a model. But the concepts can be taught at the university level, because when the opportunity comes, when the data is available, and when instruments are put in the ground to measure something, whether it's in the medical field, health field, or whether it's in engineering and other technological fields, the time will come where the Sri Lankan professionals will be familiar with machine learning and artificial intelligence. And if I have to go back, say, 25 years ago, I can tell you our computational models were very, very marginal. I mean, they were very simple compared to what we have now. But there are countries who would jump at very sophisticated computer models and apply them. Well, they suited those countries at the time. Whether it was aerospace engineering or whether it is about lunar soils, well, Sri Lanka didn't have that. But we have to first manage our own problems. And if it is intermediate technology that is required, let's be it, because intermediate technology can still provide the solution for the problem at hand. So also you have to understand our country doesn't have the very large budgets anymore, especially post-COVID budgets are restricted. So you can't come up with these solutions which are going to cost a lot of money. So therefore, it is so important that Sri Lankan government and the Sri Lankan organizations should look at the skills and the talents of the Sri Lankan professionals and optimize the resources according to what we have. So rather than pushing them to go and get what Canada is doing or what UK is doing, look, we've got a problem at hand. What do you guys think the best way of putting a solution for this? We have so many rubber tires being wasted everywhere, putting everywhere. What do we do with these rubber tires? Well, they can be recycled, they can be reused. And that can be intermediate technology. That is not a rocket science. So I think my message to everyone is find the optimum solution that is appropriate and cost-effective and timely. And the modern day technological processes such as machine learning and artificial will automatically follow when the time is right. And then you can apply that. But at the education level, these concepts have to be taught even now, so that in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, those professionals will become familiar with these new concepts.
Okay, Professor. So I think that brought us to an interesting point. You touched on the post-COVID world. Yes, perhaps abilities of countries, the spending power of people, all of these things have been affected. But at the same time, the education system in itself took a bit of a beating, because I believe at different stages, at a preschool level, perhaps children lost out on the opportunities of socially interacting with one another, because it was always distant learning or virtual learning had been accustomed to. People who were maybe supposedly sitting for their ordinary or advanced level examinations went through a very rough patch, because they literally had their exam being shifted right along, indefinitely being postponed on certain occasions. So the post-COVID world has been very different. So adaptability, agility, I think becomes a very important trait as well. Although it may not have anything to do with your scope of work, but based on your experience, how do you feel a school-going child in itself should adapt to the post-COVID world, especially when it comes to managing these challenges in terms of their education?
Right. I think that's a very good question, Dinuka. I think different countries have adopted different ways of doing things. And if I were to look at how things have been done in Australia, I think because the technology is quite developed here, and for example, even the university laboratories didn't have to close down. Of course, people have to use the PPEs, they have to take care and exercise caution, and work was conducted. And we did suffer quite a bit in terms of the restrictions that were applied, in terms of the number of hours that one can spend in offices. There were, a lot of people at home and worked. But in Sri Lanka, I think the important thing is that we need to look at what we can provide the community. Firstly, Sri Lanka has economic problems, socio-economic problems that have automatically become consequences of the collapse of the economy a couple of years ago, and we all know about it. So the important thing right now is to recognize what is the quickest way that we can overcome these problems. Being frustrated, whinging about everything is not going to help. So one of our leadership skills, and especially among young people, is to think we can somehow do it. But what are the resources that are geared to enable that to happen? So is the government providing that incentive? Are the school systems providing the incentives to having extra classes, or are the students who have missed out on most important subjects, do they have opportunities to learn them again? I'm not 100% familiar with what happened and how the education Sri Lanka have been revamped after during this post-COVID period. But other countries have done it in different ways. Australia also suffered a lot. As you can see, universities suffered millions and millions of losses. And there were problems. Everything was budgeted. There were cost cutting everywhere. So I'm sure the countries have the same problem. But how we overcome this, in my view, is to recognize the priorities. What are the priorities right now? Well, Sri Lanka is essentially still an agricultural country. Is agriculture and aquaculture looked after in Sri Lanka? Is the tea plantations, the rubber plantations, and the general agricultural produce, are we spending enough time and enough effort to keep them sustainable? These are the things I think we need to concentrate more. Okay, we still have to produce doctors, we still have to produce engineers, but how do we intertwine all these different fields into a package where one discipline looks after another discipline? Is the education system, does it give you a holistic view of how to improve the Sri Lankan economy by collaborating within the disciplines, interdisciplinary collaboration? Is this happening in Sri Lanka, not just at the school education level, but also at the professional collaboration levels? Are the different engineering communities getting together and collaborating on projects? Are our engineers trying to find solutions through dams and irrigation to help the farmers? I think these are the things that we can innovatively look at. And then my message there is that there has to be a lot more of these interdisciplinary collaborations and intertwining between the disciplines to get the Sri Lankan economic model fine-tuned and bring it to a higher level. I think this is something that all Sri Lankan professionals should think as their responsibility right now, because you have to now do more with budgets that are less. And that's part of the innovation.
Yep. I think that's part of the challenge. That I think you touched on the point. Perhaps we are faced with more challenges. We have little to play with. This is probably the time, like you said, we have to focus on our core strengths to make sure that we capitalize on those strengths to ensure that we go the long distance. So from a student's perspective, Professor, the transition from being an excellent student, because if you look at engineers, for example, Ananda College always has produced some of the best graduates as far as the stream of mathematics is concerned. But a good student, a student who necessarily scored 3 A's with a good Z score for their A levels would necessarily not translate themselves into an excellent engineer, and vice versa. A person who may have not done extremely well in terms of their advanced level examinations might still work out to be an excellent engineer in terms of their professional career. How would you, or what kind of advice would you give to a student who's transitioning themselves from being an academic eventually to being a strong professional? What kind of advice would you give to such individuals in terms of managing that transitionary phase?
I think the managing the transitionary phase is also partly to do with your understanding of the circumstances and what you have been trained in and what you really want to be. Of course, the monetary factor is always there. I mean, you've talked about academic. If you are a person who wants a lot of dollars, then don't become an academic. You do business, or you become a professional engineer and then form your own consulting company or your contracting firm. So there are different passions. So the monetary factor is also there, and this is up to individuals. But at the same time, I think the most important thing is that we have to recognize that the performance in examinations, even the performance in examination at the university level, is not a direct link to say, well, you are going to be a brilliant engineer. You can end up getting a first class in civil engineering undergraduate degree, but you might 10 years down the line, you may be a manager in a commercial bank. I've known plenty of engineers who are working in banks because they realize later in their life, well, I shouldn't have done this field. I got carried away because I was really good in mathematics and good in my exams. So I thought I'll be a fantastic engineer. But when they actually experience the challenges and the passion that comes later, they thought, well, maybe I should do business administration and go in a different field. Now, I think one should be very mindful of the fact that sometimes your career paths can suddenly change. And that's not a bad thing, because if you believe that everything happens to the good, it goes with your passion. Sometimes you need to make that change, and you do it. And very often you can be successful because at the end you realize, well, I have an engineering degree, but now I'm managing a business, but I like this, and this is where I need to be. So I don't think people have to take that in a negative way, but I think people have to be encouraged. And on the other hand, people who don't do well in exams and simply scrape through university degrees, they shouldn't be discouraged either. They should be passionate in finding, well, I didn't do the university, but I am somehow trying to do this because intuition tells me and my own common sense tells me I can still be a very good engineer because I'm very good with my thinking and getting things done in the field. So sometimes I have in Australia, even some of the best Sri Lankan engineers in this country, they didn't get first classes or even second uppers. They just passed through the university system, but they are in Australia some of the best practicing engineers that you'll ever find. So that comes later with life. So that's what I'm saying, that there's always a learning period even later in your life. You should never give up. You should go with your passion, and you go with what you think is right for you and not worry too much about what the others think. It's up to you. At the end of the day, it's your fate to fine-tune everything that you have and your skills. And I think this is really the bottom line in my view.
You spoke of your academics, Professor, your career as an academic, and I read that you're currently serving as a distinguished professor at the University of Technology in Sydney. I believe for a long period of time you've been attached to the University of Wollongong as well. Now you mentioned for the past 3 decades, although I wish that you were able to say that your contributions was probably for the Sri Lankan system, but you contributed immensely for the development of railway systems there in Australia, which speaks volumes once you really see and experience the product that you have at hand right now. But it would have been quite a responsibility for you to have balanced academic. I know you do a lot of research work as well. If I've read it right again, you've done close to 900 publications. And so how do you, over 1,000 labs. So I've lost count. So based on all what I've read about you and I've seen and heard, I'm very curious to understand, how do you balance your academic research and all these other commitments, the multiple hats that you wear in the different roles that you play? Because irrespective of the profession, irrespective of the area of expertise, managing your time, managing your capacities and your bandwidth is very important. I'd like to get to know a bit about how you get about with this.
Right. I think being a distinguished professor, I think all distinguished professors, we have relatively low teaching loads. So we are not really programmed every day to do a 2-hour lecture or anything like that. We teach the subjects that we are experts in, that mainly postgraduate subjects, and also training of students in their thesis, what we call capstone dissertation. That is actually providing young people how to apply things in the field. So we don't have a very busy teaching schedule. But what, as a distinguished professor, what I provide is the leadership and the inspiration and the training and the mentoring of the younger academics who are in my team. So my center, the Transport Research Center of University of Technology, Sydney, is by far the largest in the country. And it's got over 40 or 45 PhD students, more than 10 postdoctoral fellows, and about a dozen academic staff who are involved. So it's a large group. So I don't have to feel that I need to do everything, but I provide the leadership to get things done. So daily work is very, very important, where you recognize the strengths of the people who work with you, and then you give them the work that they would enjoy and learn a lot from. So this is something in part of our leadership, to actually know the strengths and weaknesses of the people who are working with you, including the PhD students. For example, when you realize that a PhD student is very good with experimental work, you give that person that kind of work. You don't give that person high-level computational work if you know that that person is not up to that. So I think this is something that I do very well. So balancing the academic governance or research governance and the leadership is something where I am able to integrate different components of my research life into one package. So something that is very important in that is the industry engagement. Because what's the point of a research center if we are only developing outcomes that are going to end up in a shelf in a library? It's not worth it. We need to get industry engagements. We need to get industry to adopt what the tangible outcomes that we develop, and they have to be adopted in practice, and then they can see the outcomes. And then in return, industry helps you to get more external grants, and the cycle continues. So in a way, I don't consider it as a balancing this versus that. For me, it comes naturally as an integrated package. So if you ask me, what is your research? I can tell you the research topic, but the research leadership and the academic governance within the university is actually one package. And it comes to a point, it's almost impossible to delineate one component with the other because they are well integrated. So that's how it works.
So basically, you look at it from a perspective where one complements the other, as opposed to them functioning as independent lines of responsibility.
Right. Yeah. At the junior level, of course, at the there will be junior academics who do their own thing, but as a director of a research center, large research center, it is actually my obligation to put all those things together and integrate it. And they will learn with time when they mature up in their own research work, because we have academic staff who are postdoctoral fellows all the way to lecturer, senior lecturer, associate lecturer, professor, and so on. So they all have different allocation of work. And at the end of the day, I'm responsible for putting them all together. So that's the way the everything is integrated.
I guess it boils down to the fact, Professor, we spoke of this before as well. The subject matter expertise also obviously takes you to a certain point, but beyond that, I also believe it is also your social skills, your ability to manage, delegate, lead teams. I believe it all boils down to that based on what you've actually mentioned to us right now. But my second last question to you before we let you go, I know it's quite late in the day for you as well, but we spoke a lot about, you spoke about the kind of academics who are there. You spoke about the different tiers of staffing who looks into some of the higher level of education that we just spoke of. And we also touched on the fact that we Sri Lankans are exceedingly looking at opportunities overseas in terms of their academics as well as professional careers. But how important, as a person who's been exposed to it, as a person who has perhaps made the most out of that such an opportunity, how important do you think is international exposure and collaboration for young engineers? If I may ask you for a very short answer.
Yeah, I think it's very important, but the international exposure should come at the correct time, Dinuka. For example, when you start as a young engineer working in the site, if you are a civil engineer or a mechanical engineer, right after you graduate from a university, that's not the time to go after international collaboration, because the very first thing that you need to do is to accumulate your knowledge in that particular subject and become confident in what you do first. And once you get that confidence, then you can look at various collaborations, and the collaboration begins at home. So you need to collaborate with various disciplines and various departments and divisions within the same structure, within the same organization. That's the first thing. And after that, you will find when there are big projects like mega projects, you will get international consultants coming to Sri Lanka and you will be working with them. And then that is the time that you need to collaborate with them, work with them and learn from them, because the different international cultures are very different. In fact, the work ethics, the professional ways of looking at things, getting things done, the kind of teamwork changes very differently from the Western world when you go towards the Asian sector. So there are a lot of ways of doing it. If you're an academic, it's different. In the academic world, from the time that a lecturer is quite young, we encourage them, well, when you are applying for a project, you can ask a professor from another university in UK or USA to become an advisor for your project. So if you are successful in that particular grant, then that particular professor also provides that indirect mentorship for you. So in the academic world, that is very, very focused and strategically formulated for the younger staff to get that international collaboration from the time you are a young person, young lecturer. But in the professional world, it's different, because that also depends on the type of work you are doing, whether you are in consultancy or whether you are in construction. But I think Sri Lanka provides that ideal opportunity, because every time I've been to Sri Lanka, even during the tsunami days when I worked to help Sri Lankan Railways to rejuvenate our damaged railway tracks, there were a lot of foreign experts, even in 2005, that time. And then I was a UNDP consultant to Sri Lanka on a couple of occasions, and I worked with international experts while I was there. So young people can get those opportunities, even in the professional fields, when the time comes. But I wouldn't say that it's an absolute must as soon as you start your career. I think the most important thing is to acquire the knowledge and become confident in what you do. That's the first thing. The rest will follow later.
Thank you, Professor. I think you brought in that interesting point again. I think it's about waiting for the right time to pick this most suitable occasion, perhaps. Like you said, it comes with experience. I believe having that foundation before you take that next step will make that move so much more meaningful and sensible from an individual's perspective. I know we're running out of time. we're mostly grateful for you for being a part of a very vibrant discussion. I know there's a whole audience of people who will be very interested in listening to you as you come to Sri Lanka during November and you deliver your Alkaturation at Ananda College. But before I let you go, on a quick note, I think our audience would also like to hear a bit about you, more on the personal side of you. I think we've discussed a lot about the macros, we've discussed a lot about your professional career, but tell us a bit about yourself, what you'd like to do during your time offs. Tell us a bit about your personal life so that it will also lay the right foundation for us to end this conversation.
Right now, I think my wife and I think our lives revolve around our 1-year-old grandson. So that's what it's all about. All the weekends are about when are we going to see him? Are they coming here? So that's what it is right now. But generally, I have a lot of hobbies. I mean, I watch a lot of cricket, a lot of international cricket, and I spend quite a bit of time at the Sydney cricket grounds when the cricket matches are on. So that's something that I've been doing. And also I'm interested in music. I play the piano, I play the keyboards. So I keep my music going as well. So a lot of my weekends go into actually doing things which are off academic. And that is very, very important. As I said earlier, that break from the academic normal work at the university and research is absolutely pertinent in order to ensure that your focus and concentration is at the optimum. Because if you keep on working 7 days per week, you might not realize suddenly that your concentration actually falls low and you become less efficient than what you think, that what you want to be. So I think it's, if people who are listening to me, I think my advice is it is absolutely important, and the weekends should be considered as weekends. And you need to spend time with the family, spend time doing your hobbies, and then the week starts, the next week, your concentration is right at the top. I think that's the best way of optimizing productivity.
I think you mentioned work-life balance at the very outset. So yeah. I think that last ending note from you will provoke a lot of curiosity because you just shed light to a completely different side of your personality. You spoke of music, you spoke of the things that you do over your weekends. So I think that's a very good note for us to perhaps end this conversation in the interest of time as well. I think there'll definitely be a lot of curiosity. People will definitely be interested in hearing from you, especially now that there is a sense of curiosity about your personality and the things you do, not just in terms of your profession, but in terms of your personal life as well. So, Professor, we'd like to take this moment to thank you once again for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure having you here with us today. For having connected virtually during the late hours of your day. We totally appreciate you making the time and effort for us. We hope to see you in November, and we know that we are in for a treat to be listening to you as our Alkaturator for 2023.
Thank you very much, Dinuk. And once again, please convey my kindest regards and gratitude to the OBA of Ananda for this invitation. It has been an absolute honor and privilege to be the next Alkaturator. So I'm looking forward to November, and I will be speaking about transport infrastructure, and rest assured, I'll be talking about things that the audience can learn and at least apply that under the circumstances in Sri Lanka at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor.